下にいた役立たずどものせいで勘違いさせちまったらしいが、堂島を甘く見るなよ、キリ。
There are many popular video game series out there. While there are many of these that I have at least played one game from, there are still many that I have yet to play at all. One such series is the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series of games. I've seen some praise for the series, but also some mixed thoughts as well. It came up as the next game for me to play, so I was very interested to see what I would think of the series, or at least the first game I played of it. Yakuza 0 wound up being an interesting experience and one that left me more than a little conflicted. So let's talk about the game a little and explain why this was the case for me and how much I wound up enjoying the game at the end. Yakuza 0 is an open-world action game developed by Ryu ga Gotoku Studio. This is a game that has a number of different releases depending on the platform. The first release in the US, anyway, was in 2017 for the PS4, but it later released for the PC in 2018 and the Xbox One in 2020. There has also been an enhanced version called Yakuza 0 Director's Cut that released in 2025, which is now the only version available to purchase and goes for $49.99. I am just reviewing the original PS4 release, not the enhanced version. Yakuza 0 is also rated M, which should be expected for a game about the Yakuza. The story of Yakuza 0 is an interesting beast. The main story follows two protagonists, Kiryu and Majima. Both of their stories start out at separate points, but as the narrative progresses, the stories become connected, and while they don't really interact directly all that much, their actions do wind up affecting the other quite a bit throughout the story. Both of these men have a connection to the Yakuza, and the story is all about the criminal underworld where threats of violence and murder are just part of the job. This makes for a main story that is rather serious and full of action, betrayal, and violence that fully embraces the criminal element of the game. Problem with this comes with a lot of the side story content. Both Kiryu and Majima are paradoxes in some ways. They're tough guys who can both take and give out a beating to those who cross them, but they're also presented as good guys. They may be criminals, but they're criminals with hearts of gold, at least most of the time. Kiryu will go from beating down whole groups of Yakuza to helping a kid get back a video game that was stolen from him, while Majima will be winning prizes from a crane game for a little girl by the arcade after being given an assassination mission. Both of these are interesting and fun in their own way. However, when you put them together, they present a picture that doesn't feel like it fully lines up quite right. It's easy to like Kiryu and Majima as characters, but sometimes it's kinda hard to view them as criminals, especially with some of the side stories. Maybe that's the whole point, but it just felt a little weird to me in a lot of ways. There were also parts of the story that I just didn't feel like I understood that well on an organizational level. The structuring of the Yakuza itself was a bit hard for me to understand with all of the clans that were under this other clan, but also kinda separate as well. While I think I understood it enough to enjoy the story, I'm not sure if I fully understood all of the nuances of how it worked. Maybe this is described a little bit better in some of the other Yakuza games that were actually released before this one, but with Yakuza 0 being my entry point, I didn't really feel like I got a complete sense of how everything worked in this world. There is also just the downside to the story that tends to be a part of open world games in general. The division of main story with lots of side content can make the flow of the story drag and be very uneven if not handled well. Sadly, Yakuza doesn't really handle this the best, and it does wind up kind of affecting that story flow and pacing. I feel like these kind of setups leave you with three choices. You can ignore the side content and focus in on the main story, which makes for a nice, tight narrative, but then you're missing out on a large chunk of the game, which can also help you maybe get through some of those story moments in the game, because if you're not going through all the side content, then you're not getting money and certain upgrades and things like that. You can wait until the end to do all the side content, but this could feel like a bit of a grind since some of the side content is rather involved or could feel very similar over time. The other option is to do the side content as it unlocks, and that creates a bit of an unevenly paced narrative. I did the last option, but I feel like all of these have a downside, and it's really about picking which one you want to face the most. The side content can also not really work very well within the rather short and urgent time frame of the game's events. One example of this is that Kiryu has a business side quest that allows you to buy real estate and upgrade it using funds, and this business will earn you money over time. You have to go collect the money, and then the money will start to get collected again. Now, the story event that unlocks this business is followed by meeting another character for a drink that evening. However, in one night, you're able to build a substantial real estate empire in a very very short amount of time, if you decide to focus on this side quest instead of going to the next story mission. And it can just kind of wind up being a little silly because you've done all of this stuff in like one night and it doesn't make any sense. That said, I really don't know what I think of the story. I like the main story and I liked a good amount of the side stories the game presents. However, the juxtaposition of these two elements just doesn't work as well as I would like. It's good, but it just winds up feeling a little weird. Yakuza 0's gameplay varies quite substantially depending on what you're doing in the game. For the base story, most of the gameplay centers around getting into fights with various people, either in group brawls or more one-on-one boss battle style fights. Kiryu and Majima both get 3 main fighting styles and 1 secret style that is unlocked after completing their respective business side quest. Real estate for Kiryu and the cabaret club for Majima. Kiryu's styles feel a bit more straightforward, with a balanced style, an agile but slightly weaker stance, and then a slow but powerful stance. Majima's styles are more interesting and can be quite fun to play, with styles based off of breakdancing or one that uses a baseball bat. These styles can be leveled up by spending money on each style's upgrade tree. You can also unlock certain upgrades by going to the teacher for each of these styles, which will unlock a node on your upgrade tree and allow you to upgrade past that. These upgrades can unlock new moves, make your attack stronger, increase the max health of your character, as well as other improvements. Upgrading does get pretty expensive after a while, and it's unlikely that you'll unlock everything before the end of the game unless you're really grinding for the money. As you fight, there is also a meter called Heat, which can be filled during combat and allow you to pull off special moves against enemies. These are pretty powerful attacks that can help you take out enemies quickly or do some good damage to the health of a boss. There are also weapons that you can use in combat, but I didn't really play around with these too much. To be honest, they just kind of felt a little clunky to me and not as smooth as the combat stances. Even then, combat is a weird mix overall. It's fun, but doesn't feel particularly deep and doesn't feel very smooth to play with. Bosses can also feel very different in how you have to approach combat, and later bosses can feel a bit cheap and hard to take down. Thankfully, there is also an inventory system that allows you to stock up on items that can give you health or increase your heat bar to be able to pull off those special moves if you're getting beat up and not able to really develop that heat bar over time, that can help you in some of these battle situations. While this may be the main gameplay of the story, it is by no means the majority of the gameplay available in Yakuza 0. There are so many different minigames and side quests that it can be pretty overwhelming. As I mentioned earlier, both Kiryu and Majima have a rather involved side quest that involves them running a business. While Kiryu's involves more of a passive earning over time, Majima's requires a lot more hands-on, as you have to run your club by matching the right girl with clients that come in. Both of these require quite a bit of grinding, but I found Majima's to be more frustrating since you had to actively play it, and it didn't really give as much money for the time investment it required. Beyond this, there are tons of other things that you can discover while wandering the 2 city locations that you can play through with Majima and Kiryu. There is karaoke, dancing, darts, pool, batting cages, bowling, shogi, mahjong, blackjack, old Sega games like Outrun, and many others are all available. You don't really need to do many of these for the main story, but if you're wanting to get all the achievements in the game, you'll need to play through these mini games and even accomplish certain goals while playing them. Problem is that some of these mini games are better than others. It's cool that they put so much into the game, but I guess I'm not looking for my games to have everything in the kitchen sink, so it feels a bit unnecessary to me. Cool, but unnecessary. There are also more standard side quests that involve talking to people around the 2 locations the game takes place in. These can go a number of different ways, with you having to find something for them, fight off some kind of threat, play a mini game against them, or some other task. They usually aren't too involved and can be kind of amusing or interesting, but don't drastically shape the gameplay all that much. There are also collectible telephone cards in the game, which have images of some of the girls in the game. It's here that I'll note that Yakuza has a strangely sexual side to it, with things like the telephone cards, video stores, the phone club, and Mr. Libido. Nothing is more than girls in bikinis, but it still is a side to the game that you may want to know about before getting into it. You can generally ignore these parts too if you want, but going for full completion will require you to interact with these parts of the game. There is a lot of gameplay variety to get through in Yakuza 0, and most of it is pretty fun. How much you enjoy all of it probably depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for a one-stop game that has all kinds of different little games for you to play around with? If so, you'll love this. If you're looking for a game that is focused and every aspect supports the general direction of the game, then you're going to be more disappointed. Also, if you're somebody like me who likes to go for achievements, this is going to be quite the grind to get through. You have to do so many of the mini games and get certain accomplishments on mini games to earn some of the trophies that it's going to be kind of a tedious, long affair to get through. I like the gameplay overall, but felt that the game tried to do a bit too much. I'd rather them drop a mini game or 3 and add more depth or smoothness to the combat, or tweak the major side quest for each character to make it a bit more engaging and a little less of a grind. The art style of Yakuza 0 is going for a more realistic look as it brings an 80s Japan aesthetic to life. Your game takes place in the city, so it is full of neon, large buildings, and big crowds. The style works pretty well, but at this point the game is over 10 years old, so it's not going to be cutting edge. It still holds up pretty well, but just go in with the proper expectations. Sound is also decent. There is voice acting in the game, but it's mostly limited towards big story moments and only in Japanese for this original release. This doesn't bother me since I'm used to reading subtitles and have no problem with it, but I know that some care a bit more about having to read dialogue in their media. There is also some pretty good music in the game, but it's a little sporadic. The opening title is very catchy, and there are some fun tracks in the dancing and karaoke minigames. Fights also have some background music, which were good, but not amazing. A lot of the time, exploring the city, though, doesn't really have any background music, but is simply the sounds of the city going on around you. This helps develop the atmosphere nicely, but doesn't make for a super memorable experience on the sound front. Yakuza 0 was a hard game for me to figure out what I thought about it. It felt like a game that I liked most of the parts of, but for some reason connecting those parts all together just made for a strange end result. The game is a serious, gritty drama about the criminal underworld, but is also silly and lighthearted. The story is good, but can get quite diluted and drawn out by the plethora of side content and mini-games on offer here. I definitely think that Yakuza 0 is a good game, but can confidently say that it doesn't quite have what it takes to be considered a favorite of mine. Thinking it through, I think that I am giving Yakuza 0 a 7 out of 10. The game is overall fun, but it just had too many things that dragged it down for me. This winds up making the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series one that I'd be interested in trying more of, but not one that takes a high priority moving forward. I feel like this series is great for people who want their games to be a buffet of gameplay options. I think I just tend to appreciate games that have a bit more focus to them, and Yakuza 0 is definitely not one of those games.
他に手はねえんだ。このまま指くわえて見てるわけにはいかねえ。